Today, I want to do something a bit different. I want to go over a Rutger Bregman interview. He's written a new book called Moral Ambition: How the Middle Classes, the Experts, need to step up, essentially. And we need a new pragmatic politics that moves away from identity politics to focusing on real issues and trying to solve them, which sounds obvious, but we haven't been doing for a long time. So let's get straight into the interview.
For me, this is not normal politics anymore. This is not left versus right. This is good versus evil.
Yeah.
I am deeply, deeply worried. We're talking about a real chance of an authoritarian breakthrough, an utterly unhinged kind of politics.
So the trend at the moment is nationalism, selfishness, if you like, with a vengeance. How do you break through to that?
It is not enough to just check your privilege. You also got to use it.
Hello and welcome to The Forecast. With the world still reeling from Donald Trump's tariffs, there's more bad news as the International Monetary Fund has slashed the UK's growth forecast and says that the global economy will see a significant slowdown. Add to that wars in Europe and the Middle East, climate change, and the promise and the peril of AI. Is it possible to find hope amongst this constant chorus of doom and gloom? Well, one person who thinks they might have an answer is our guest today, Rutger Bregman, a progressive historian famous for taking on the Davos billionaires. Rutger, good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So one of the reviews about your book said it was wonderfully dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Is it dangerous?
It is a
You'd
bit
like
dangerous.
it to be dangerous.
It is a bit dangerous.
What's the danger?
It encourages people to join a cult, if you will, of radical do-gooders who want to devote their career, their lives to some of the most pressing issues that we face as a species. I think that the waste of talent that is currently going on is one of the greatest wastes of our time, even worse than plastic straws, if you will. Mm-hmm. The book is a call to arms for the best and brightest among us in particular, who are currently often, stuck in consultancy jobs and finance jobs and corporate law jobs, and I think they could do so much more good.
They might really like those jobs.
Well, maybe some of them do, and maybe they like the paycheck in particular.
Yeah. And you think that's wrong?
No, not necessarily.
Right.
I am just inspired by examples throughout history of elites redefining what it means to be successful. I mean, in this country, the United Kingdom, we've seen the greatest movement for human rights this world has ever seen, the abolitionist movement. Yeah. I'm personally from the Netherlands, and we didn't stop, the slave trade or engaging that because we thought it was bad. The British forced us. So I spend a lot of time studying that movement, and I realized...
And you write about it, of course, in your book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Moral Ambition.
And I realized that it was part of a bigger societal shift that was all about redefining what it means to be successful and living a different kind of life.
So is the key to this book that you're appealing to essentially smart people, who've got excess intelligence, excess capacity, excess energy. You think they're using it in the wrong way and
Yes.
say, come on, get on board for something that you will feel, that will make you feel good about yourself, that you might be remembered for at the pearly gates.
Yeah. I think the most ambitious people should be working on the most important global problems. It's as simple as that. We've got currently...
Which sounds so obvious when you think about it, but it's so true. And also as well, I think a lot of people on the left and right have been convinced that we can't do any better. Like, this is the best. And that's capitalist realism. The idea that it can't get any better. Like, this is it. We're resigned to our fate almost. No, it could be so much better in so many ways. And we have agency to actually solve these problems. But we've been convinced that, no, this is it. No, know your limits, stay in your lane, we'll sort everything out. And this is actually quite exciting. I think it says a lot about the times that, because I think he's a really good author. He's obviously a pragmatic guy. And I think that's so important in terms of what can we do? What can we do? And there's a lot we can do.
Three types of waste of talent. We've got people who aren't very ambitious and aren't very idealistic. They're stuck in the so-called BS jobs. It's a highly technical term, that scientists use to describe those socially meaningful, meaningless jobs. And it's about 25% of the population, according to a big survey.
Give us an example of that job.
HR managers, marketeers, consultants, corporate lawyers. I mean, a lot of people stuck in cubicles. And it's not me saying it about their jobs. That would be unfair. I mean, people can be the judge of the social value of their own job. So it is people saying it about their own work. I think that's tragic. But we also have a lot of people who are ambitious, but not very idealistic, right? And then we talk about all these Harvard graduates, the Oxbridge graduates, who could, build a rocket that brings us to Mars, but instead they become quants or something like that.
And where does a historian or a journalist fit into that category?
It depends on what they work on, obviously. So I wouldn't want to live in a world without historians.
Right.
I think that history has a lot to offer us, especially right now as things are quickly getting darker.
Yeah.
We like to think that we are so exceptional. I currently live in the United States, and I mean that's a country in particular that likes to think that it is very exceptional. But
Exceptionalism can be a dangerous thing.
Yeah, and we've seen these things before. We've seen democracy breaking down before, and we need people to take a stand against that. But I'm also quite critical of some of my friends on the left and some progressives who are maybe idealistic, but not ambitious at all. We've got so many people who are utterly obsessed with their own footprint, for example. They don't fly, they don't eat meat, they don't use those plastic straws. But in the best possible scenario, they have a footprint of 0 and they might as well not exist, which is not very ambitious to me. And same is true for all those educated elites who spend a decade policing language, saying you can't say this, you can't say that, you have to use all the right words to describe all the injustices in the world. Well, that's also not very ambitious, and that's not how you actually help people.
So where does someone like Elon Musk fit in?
I mean, I agree completely, but I think that's a phase that we almost maybe had to go through and go like, right, let's get this out the way. Language is important. It really is. And I think we've kind of won that debate. There's certain things. Yes, we could be doing other things at the same time. And I think that's this zero-sum politics, like, oh, we can't talk about identity politics. Always class. Like, we can talk a bit of both. They are interlinked. Like, Marx said that. Like, the struggle for women is a struggle for everybody. And it is interrelated to class labor. So we need to really bring those things together. The struggle for black people, women, gay rights, trans rights is a Marxist struggle. They're not separate.
To this, rubric, because I mean, here's someone is trying to fix the problems of the planet. Trying to fix the problems of industry, of vehicular traffic, and is trying to fix the problems of government. He would say at the moment. Not everyone would recognise that, but that's what he would say. And he has been rewarded, quite lavishly by shareholders.
The question is, are we talking about Elon Musk pre-Twitter or post-Twitter? I think the man sadly went nuts. But before that, you got to recognize that he built 2 amazing, amazing companies. And I'm often quite frustrated by, again, some people on the left who say, oh, he's fake, he's not smart, he's just doing it with government subsidies or whatever. I mean, obviously, he's taking billions of dollars in government subsidies, and that's exactly what it should do. That's what those subsidies were intended for. And he built an amazing company. Like the whole transition towards electric cars. Thank you, Elon.
Well, he didn't build Tesla. He took it over. I think legally he tried to fight for him being the legal founder, which is so pathetic. But I think we need to criticize figures like Elon Musk because, yes, in some ways he's intelligent, but he was lucky and he's a good salesman. He's not necessarily an engineer. So I think we can criticize Elon Musk for his politics. And yeah, he did take subsidies, which he's paid back. I've been corrected on that. But I think, we can criticize Elon Musk. We should be able to criticize Elon Musk. And also, give him credit because he did create SpaceX, which is, obviously a good thing broadly.
But he's trying to apply the same principles to slimming down government. Now, you could say that he's doing a terrible job of it or he's being dishonest about it. But in his own mind, as someone who's, maybe heard your clarion call to be ambitious and morally ambitious, he thinks he's doing the right thing. And I just wonder if the problem is that what is moral ambition to one person is morally reprehensible to someone else. And it's very hard to find a common denominator.
Look, I'm not a moral philosopher, and I don't want to get into a boring debate about what is moral.
See, that is really worrying to me. Like, we don't know, we can't even differentiate what is good and bad. And that's where the right have muddied the water. Like the idea that now, should we like pursue net zero? Should we pursue climate change? Should we let trans people have freedoms? Should we focus on inequality and wealth, taxing wealth? Like, these are good things. These objectively, we know that redistribution of wealth, high tax rates in the 50s, 60s were good for people. That's when people were happiest. And countries like Finland, Norway, high tax rates, it makes people happy. high trust societies go from high tax rates and actually sharing the wealth, because trickle down economics has not worked in 40 years. So we need another model. And that's what people want. That's what people want.
Reality, what is
But
good
your book is
versus
called
evil.
Moral Ambition.
That's true, but I think that a lot of us are on the same page. So I think that a lot of people will agree that the fact that 15,000 kids die today from easily preventable diseases is not very good. The fact that we are utterly unprepared for the next pandemic is not very good. The fact that 80 billion animals are slaughtered every single year and live in pretty horrific conditions in so-called factory farms is not very good. So I don't try to be very controversial here. I'm mainly saying, like, these are clearly very big problems. These are very talented people. Like, maybe those people should do something about those very big problems.
So we have these incredible, global challenges, which we keep talking about, whether it's, the promise and the peril of AI, whether it's climate change, whether it's the next pandemic. And yet at the same time, what we're seeing is that national borders, personal borders, walls, frontiers are popping up left, right, and center. So the trend at the moment is nationalism, selfishness, if you like, with a vengeance.
Yeah.
So how do you break through to that? Because that's not just about you're wasting your life. You're much too clever to be a consultant.
Yeah.
It's, you need to have a different mindset. You need to cheer up a little bit.
Yeah.
Be more positive. That's the tricky part, isn't it?
I am unashamedly cosmopolitan. So I take inspiration from the great abolitionists who came before us, the suffragettes who fought for the women's right to vote. And what I see in that history of moral progress is the drive to expand the moral circle so that we don't just care about our own people. I mean, I'm a father. Obviously, I care much more about my own kids than other kids. But I also have the ability to expand my moral circle, and I have a career anyway, so I might as well do some good with it. And indeed, if you want to have the biggest possible impact, then often it does make sense to have a more international perspective.
I know you had a falling out with Tucker Carlson, once Trump's favorite journalist. But I mean, if you look at the Trump world, I know not everyone's bought into it. He has divided the world. But the point is that there are people who firmly believe in the United States and even elsewhere that his particular brand of politics is the answer to our problems of not just prosperity, but community, family, all these things.
Yeah. And that's
not actually true. I think biggest support, like a lot of countries hate Donald Trump across the planet. It's only like Israel, Kenya, and then the Philippines that actually like Trump. So that's just simply not true. And that's where the hope is. And I think this is why this is important, because we've not had ambition. We've not had a positive vision for the future. We've just been reactive to conservatives. And that's what we need now is, what are we offering? What's the positive vision for the future? Because it has to be taxing wealth. It has to be rebuilding the country. It has to be challenging capital, because that's the reason why people are not able to afford homes. That's why they're able to scapegoat immigrants and trans people. So this is, I think, hopefully the beginning of a real pragmatic vision of tax wealth. This is what we're offering. And he says it. He's talking to his own. I don't think you can convince a lot of reform voters. I don't think you can convince MAGA of them being wrong. You've got to convince your own people that we can actually do something about these problems. Because a lot of people we're kind of resided to our fate without knowing it.
That's the fundamental political divide right now.
Right.
It's on the one hand, you have a zero-sum worldview, the belief that, yeah, if other people come into your country, they only come to take things away from you. And yeah, like with everything I have in me, and I think this is true for a lot of other people, yeah, we want to fight against that because it's not, in my view, not true. I am deeply, deeply worried. As I said, I currently live in New York. I sometimes got the feeling that Europeans don't always realize just yet how bad the situation is. We're talking about a real chance of an authoritarian breakthrough in the next couple of years. I live there, on an immigrant visa. People are kicked out left and right if they are critical of the regime currently. That's what's currently happening. For me, this is not normal politics anymore. This is not left versus right. This is good versus evil.
Well, I mean, I think talking about left and right diluted somewhat.
And that's how I do think we need to, although I don't like the term, good and evil, I think that's how we need to frame it, because we are dealing fascism, movement against democracy, and a liberal movement is evil. Like, we talk about the right talk about Western values. What does that mean? Human suffrage, democracy, freedom of movement. These are Western values that we should cherish and fight for. And I think how we fight Trumpism, I think we've got to fight the lies. I think on some level, you've got to call out the lies. But also, what are we offering? Like, what was Harris offering? What does Keir Starmer offer? Very little. Very little. So that's why people are turning to Trump, because he's promising. So I think we've got to overpromise. Like, we're going to rebuild the country. And we can do it. We don't have to lie. We can do so much. We can offer people hope. We can offer AI. We can offer Green New Deal. We can offer... Can you afford a house? No, you can't. We're going to build houses. How about that? I know Labour are doing that, and that's a good start. That is a good start, but it's not enough. They need to be taxing wealth.
But there's a reason why Trump got elected the first time, I mean, slightly less convincingly, and the reason why he got elected a second time more convincingly. And
not much more convincingly, really. The second time, it was pretty close.
There's a reason why he has this extraordinary following. I mean, it is a cult-like following.
Sure.
You talked about a cult at the beginning, and I think those people, just wonder how you break through, whether you should even bother. Where you're bothering to break through to those people who voted for him to say, I want to understand why you're so angry, and then maybe we could use that rage in a different way.
So
or do you think it's a lost cause?
I worked at a journalism platform for a long time in the Netherlands, where we would always say, like, we need to break out of our bubble. And I was always like, should we really? Like, I want my friends to read my pieces, and very often they don't even. So in this book, I am talking to my own people, because I'm frankly a bit angry at them.
Right.
So many of us...
You're angry with your own people or the other people? Or
my own people, yeah.
I really like that. It's really counterintuitive, because it seems like, we've got to talk to working class people. And you should listen to everyone. But the left aren't very good at talking to themselves. We're constantly fighting. You look at online leftist circles, it's all drama. It's all arguing. And I don't want to engage with it. I've not done any, and I never will do a drama thing about Hassan, or I don't want to mention names really, but we're constantly fighting amongst each other. We need to be working on the same team, and the left aren't very good at that. The right are amazing. They will put small disagreements. I mean, often they just agree on most stuff, but they will put disagreements aside and work together. We don't do that. The left are constantly fighting with each other over semantics and language and gatekeeping and purity testing. That's gone now. We need to move forward. We need to be, what are the problems and what are the solutions? Because, I mean, that's the sad thing. The left is dead. What is the leftist project in the UK and America? It doesn't exist, and we need to stop building it, because otherwise they win.
People.
Because many of us went to great universities. Maybe we went to Oxford or Cambridge, and we wrote these application essays when we wanted to get in. And we said that we were going to, make a massive difference. We were going to take on global hunger. We were going to build affordable housing. We were going to accelerate the clean energy transition. And look at us. What are we doing? So I'm not really interested in preaching at MAGA people or anything like that. I think
you want to preach at your own people.
Exactly. And I think a big reasons why progressive...
And do they find that really annoying?
Yeah, sure. But I guess I'm more effective if I am trying to convince people in my own circle.
I really love that. I think that's where the left have been going wrong. Like, you're not going to convince a reform voter or MAGA that, like, climate change is real. I'm sorry, it's just not happening. They live in a different reality. So you've got to convince your own people, like, what are we going to do about this? Like, what action can we take? We need to get into power. How do we get into power? And I think things are happening with the Jimmy the Giant is going to be talking to Jack Palahniuk on Monday. I'm not sure when this video is coming out. It might have happened by then. But things are happening. I think the left are waking up to it, go, right, okay. Things are getting bad. And I think that's often how it happens. Like, people realize how bad it is, and then they have a stark awakening, a rude awakening. And I think that is happening.
than if I, and by the way, half of the country already has an essential job, right?
Yeah.
Teachers, plumbers, nurses, care workers, they don't need some lecture about moral ambition from me.
YouTubers.
I have been incredibly frustrated by the purity politics that's been so dominant on the left. We talk about it, the policing of language, the utter inability to actually build things, to actually achieve things. I think we got to have a real honest conversation about why has government become so ineffective, for example. We can say, oh yeah, clean energy now, but if it's actually illegal to build because of all kinds of red tape, etc., well, that is a problem. Why does so many talent flow to the private sector or to Silicon Valley, for example? Well, because you can still build in the virtual world, right? You can still build with bits and bytes, but you very often can't build with real bricks and mortar, right? That's become very problematic, both in the UK, in the US, in Europe. So got to have an honest conversation about that. If you don't fix real problems for real people in the real world, then at some point they get very angry and they start voting for, people who don't have the best of intentions.
But fixing real problems, we call it, here we love to talk about fixing potholes on the streets. Build, housing, all these sort of basic things, infrastructure, roads, better plumbing. This is also the kind of stuff that Donald Trump talks about.
Yeah, he talks about it. He talks a lot about it. Doesn't do much, right? I think we can now see that there's no real economic plan here. I've actually spoken to quite a few entrepreneurs also in Silicon Valley who are more on the right side of the political spectrum, who are feeling quite a bit of buyer's remorse. It's been, if the situation wasn't so bad, it would be funny. What we now have in the US is court politics. You have Donald Trump at the center of it all, and the people who are best at sucking up to him, well, they get, a little bit of candy. So yeah, you wave with a letter from the king or something like that, and maybe that works for a while. But this is the situation we're in. It's an utterly unhinged kind of politics.
But it's also a cult, isn't it? And it's a kind of revolution. And in a revolution, what happens is that when the revolution doesn't work, mostly, history tells us they double down on the revolution. There's more revolution. It becomes more radical. And then maybe at some stage, there's a correction of course, or there's some bloodletting, or there's a counter-revolution.
Sometimes. So I think a hopeful example is Poland. Poland also had a lot of democratic backsliding going on. A very right-wing populist government that was in power a couple of years ago, trying to end basically the balance of powers and the power of the courts. Then there was a big coalition against it, from the left to the center to the moderate right. And I think that's exactly what we need right now. All great movements in history, honestly, have been coalitions. It's one of the things that, again, my friends on the left are not always the best at, working together with people who don't share all their opinions. But it is very important. It's what you see when...
Yeah, I think, obviously we are bad at it. I think that's why there's a chance for potentially a coalition between Lib Dems and the Greens. The Lib Dems are doing really good at the moment. And I think Ed Davey, he seems like a normal guy. He'll attack Trump. We need to build coalitions with people, because the Greens can't do it on their own. We need the help. I'd like to think it was Labour. Probably not going to happen, but we need to start really getting people on our side, because it is a numbers game. And with Greens and the Lib Dems, because people in the next election aren't going to vote Labour if they continue on the course they're going on. So where they're going to go, Greens and Libs, they need to come together. It could be really good.
When you study those abolitionists, for example, the great coalition between the Quakers and the evangelicals, you see it in the civil rights movement. People like to think that, they were so radical and purist. No, not at all. They're super pragmatic. And I think that's what we need again today.
What's really interesting in America, and you see it to some extent here, in Europe, is that the storytellers that have captured the moment are the storytellers that are angry, the rageful storytellers, mostly on the populist right, but also on, look at Germany, on the populist left, there are plenty of those who've kind of ignited the imagination of young voters. Where's the optimistic storytelling in modern politics? the kind of things that you refer to in your book. I see there the essence of what could become.
So I think you're on
a
the wrong
posit-
track there. I
a
think you're on the
positive
wrong
story.
track. So it's not 2015 anymore. It's not a time where you say, oh, we're going to do good by doing well, and let's give a TED talk about it and bring the community together and have some
That's
nice
what
conversations.
I'm not referring to that.
I think this is a time for, maybe you could call it moderate anger, right? You can still be angry at the state of the world, but still be, how do you say that? Sensible and moderate and compromising in your approach. I'm very angry about what I consider the betrayal of elites. We have so many educated elites, and their big betrayal is not a lack of empathy, a lack of listening to Trump voters or reform
So you're
voters or
saying
whatever.
match their anger with my anger. That's what you're saying.
I think that
Intuitively, I think moderate anger seems like a contradiction, and it is. But I think it's the right approach. We need to be angry, but we need to be level-headed and pragmatic. We need to be very angry and using that anger and getting people excited for an alternative. But it needs to be pragmatic and, okay, right, what can we do? What can Labour do? Because they can do a lot. They can tax wealth. They can raise capital gains tax. They can start rebuilding in a serious way. They've been, doing some good stuff. Like, I've noticed around my area, potholes are being filled in. That's a good start, but we need more. We need more ambition, because Labour have no ambition. Like, they could be so much better. But Keir Starmer, what ambition does he that is not a word you associate with Keir Starmer.
sometimes there's justified anger that can motivate people, because here, as I said, the big betrayal is the lack of actually contributing to the common good. So
That is the betrayal
yes,
of the
yes,
elites.
exactly.
What
yeah,
other people like to
yeah.
call the elites.
Yeah. And honestly, for me, writing this book, writing about moral ambition also, impelled me to take a long, hard look in the mirror. I've spent a decade of my career in the awareness industry, standing on the sideline, giving my opinion, looking at the people who are in the arena doing the actual work. And I started experiencing this emotion that I like to describe as moral envy. I think more journalists could use some moral envy because, for us, and I guess I'm not really a
I have no
journalist
idea what
anymore.
you're talking about. What is moral envy?
It is just looking at those people who are doing the good work, who are taking the risks, who have this entrepreneurial approach, who don't always succeed, who have to sacrifice, who fall and then stand up again. It's something I deeply admire.
Just getting back to the sacrifices that you're asking people to make by giving up, that job in consulting or banking. I mean, a lot of jobs that you would classify as kind of relatively useless, let's say, or the world would continue spinning without those jobs. Those are jobs that don't pay particularly well, but they pay enough to pay someone's mortgage, to provide, 3 square meals a day. And I mean, when people are squeezed economically, do they then still have the luxury to think about doing the morally right thing or not?
Money matters. Margaret Thatcher had this excellent saying when she said that the Good Samaritan didn't just have good intentions.
He had cash.
He had money as well, right? And in the fight against some of the biggest problems we face, we need money. So I co-founded an organization called the School for Moral Ambition. We like to see ourselves as the Robin Hoods of talent. We take away these people out of the Bermuda Triangle of talent, consultancy, corporate law, and finance, and we convince them to work on some of these most important things. For example, the fight against the tobacco industry is one of the causes we took up in Europe. What you quickly realize if you're working on that is that there's a total lack of capital here. So there, what you also need is entrepreneurial people, people who have built great companies, scaled those companies, who climbed the first ladder of success and who are now like, okay, let's use that capital to make a big difference. Again, abolitionists, suffragettes, they weren't financed by the government. They weren't financed, with some fancy corporate ad deal or whatever. No, they were financed by brave individual philanthropists. So money is important.
But, especially in America, where philanthropy is also tax deductible, there's an awful lot
Well, for now, actually,
well,
Trump is going to crack down
he's going to come.
on that as
I'm
well,
sure he might
probably.
do. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah.
But, there's some very, very rich individuals, and you've met them, and they show up at Davos and they say, we want to be taxed more. We want to pay more money in taxation. And indeed, many of them could. And they wouldn't be missing meals if they did. But they're not the real challenge, are they? The real challenge is the people in the kind of lower tiers who don't earn that much money, but there are millions of them. And you need safety in numbers to actually affect change, don't you?
Well, I'm not certain.
Really?
There's a great quote from Margaret Mead the anthropologist, who once said that we should never doubt that small groups of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. So Peter Thiel, the right-wing venture capitalist, has this great saying that he says, what's the opposite of a consultancy? Well, it's a cult. It's a small group of people who are really committed to an ideal that they're willing to fight for. Now, that's not necessarily good. You could argue that some of the worst dictatorships started as a cult. But it's also true for some of the greatest, most beautiful movements we've actually seen.
But then
I'll end there. I'll put the link for the rest of the interview. There's another few minutes. That really gives me hope. Like the idea that, again, counterintuitive, that we need to talk to our own people. We need to convince the left that this arguing amongst each other ain't helpful. It just, it kind of enables the right to just continue. And also, a small amount of people can have massive power. We need wealthy people on our side, and we need to work within the system. Yes, capitalism is the problem, but that's all we have. We need to work within the system. We need to find those wealthy people who are willing to fund campaigns like what Gary Stevenson's doing, like what people are doing, AOC, Bernie Sanders in America. We can do this. We need a small amount of people, but we need that money. We need people engaging, and we need to stop arguing amongst ourselves, because they're winning and we may be right, but we're not winning. So hit the like button and I'll see you in the next video.